So what we're going to do is we're here to expose it, let people tell their story, and let everybody in the public see the horrors of the court system in Suffolk County, New York.
Okay, we're good.
All right, folks, we're gonna get this rolling. I'm gonna start the show right now. I'm gonna give a quick review on what has transpired through the center since our last meeting. That'll take about 10 minutes. We'll then pause while we open the buffet for everyone to get some nice dinner. And when we're complete, everyone coming up and down for the buffet, I'll hand it off to our guest speaker, Tim Hoffer. Okay, so at this point, folks, let's get settled, and if we can kindly get your attention up front, okay? Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, so I'm Steve Levy, former Suffolk County executive, former New York State Assemblyman, and presently the executive director of the Center for Cost-Effective Government. As you know, we're a not-for-profit entity, nonpartisan, which deals with trying to tackle those issues that are the main drivers of the high cost of living and high taxes here on Long Island and throughout New York State. Our motto is, before you can enact change, you first have to identify the problem. And a lot of the problems are really inside baseball. And that's why it is important to have entities such as our center and the Empire Center for New York State Policy. Tim Hoffer is the executive director. He'll be speaking a little bit after me to let you know what you could be doing to identify those problems. All right, guys in the back, if you could just keep it down a little bit, that would be appreciated. All right, at our last meeting, we talked about putting together a consortium of different schools that could start making their purchases together to create efficiencies of scale. I actually, along with the help of Senator Phil Boyle, sponsored meetings with the 12 school districts, it's 11 or 12 school districts in the town of Islip. We brought all the superintendents together and laid out to them the concept of buying their materials in bulk. Now, they can buy off of BOCES, they can buy off the state list, but it's assumed that it's cheaper that way. It's not always cheaper that way. And you probably saw the Newsday front page article probably 6 months ago about football helmets and sporting equipment, and how one school can pay $200 and another school pay $400 for the same helmet. And that's something we tried to tackle. So we brought them all together. We said, let's do an experiment where we buy our athletic equipment together, and while we're at it, let's look at some other items. We looked at trash collection as well. They were all, oh yeah, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. So we spent a number of months on it, but when push came to shove, and you asked the schools to give us the details of what they wanted, what they would buy, we got maybe 2 districts that gave us the details. So all of that work, you know, as you say, you were shaking your head from the start, Adrian, that, you know, Andrea, it's not going to happen. These guys aren't going to do it. Let's try it. But you were right. It wasn't going to happen. But one good thing that came out of it is we have petitioned Congress through Congressman Zeldin to see if we can get our local schools to buy off the federal master list. You can buy off state list, but there's not the ability right now, unless you're talking about cybersecurity equipment or certain IT equipment, to get the big volume discount off the federal list. I don't know why they don't allow it, but he's actively pursuing that. And if we can get that, that alone will be a major victory for taxpayers throughout the nation. So we'll see how that goes. Another thing that we had brought up was the craziness on the state level and what's going to be happening to our electric rates. One of the proposals would have every taxpayer or ratepayer, depending on how they structure it, in New York State subsidize nuclear power plants in upstate New York that were teetering on default. And why were they teetering? Because the low cost of natural gas that came about ironically because fracking came into existence. I say ironically because the governor has blocked fracking, but fracking in other surrounding states has led to a revolution in energy distribution and supply, which has brought the rates way down. But as energy rates went down, the high price of supplying nuclear power stayed high in comparison to these lower costs. So these upstate nuclear plants were about to close. So in came the governor and said, well, we're going to save them. And he put together a $7 billion plan to keep them operating, even though they operate far more expensively than these other plants. What is that going to cost us? $7 billion. We are all going to be subsidizing those plants to stay open, even though they're more expensive than other plants that are out there. Cleaner, clean plants, natural gas plants. We're not talking about coal here. So we wrote an op-ed saying that should not happen, at least until Long Islanders are first reimbursed by the rest of the state for the Shoreham debt that we had to eat and nobody bailed us out. But overall, it's really bad policy. It shouldn't have happened. It has taken effect with the legislature doing nothing to stop it. But lo and behold, at least we got an editorial, an op-ed from Assemblyman Fred Thiel on the East End, who said exactly what we said, but several months later. So we had an impact as far as that goes. Boy, it's dark here. What else do we have on my list here? Okay. A couple of meetings ago, we brought up the issue of these outrageous salaries for police department members within these villages, these sleepy villages along Long Island. In Nassau, they have 60 villages. Suffolk has about 30 villages. Some of these places have maybe 8 violent crimes a year. Not even violent, 8 property crimes a year. And yet, the average salary in some of these small, sleepy villages could be 175 grand. Some in one, Rockville Center, we identified through our Freedom of Information request, they had about 64 members on their force. About 10 of them were making over $200,000. A majority of them were making over 150, with many more making over 175. Then they get the overtime built in. Then they retire and they have pensions of 175 grand a year. It's really crazy. Then you get paid for the unused sick time. So you get a cash out for a couple of $100 grand. Some of these guys are retiring with $1 million package. It's absolutely nuts. So what we've recommended to our center is for these villages to consider using part-time retired police officers where they're capped at $30,000 a year. Not every officer being a retired guy, but supplement $180,000 full-timer with a couple of part-timers. They will save millions and millions of dollars. It's now published on our website at the Center for Cost-Effective Government.org. Please check that out. We also have created, well, it wasn't us, but it was the Long Island Strategic Alliance that created this. It's a scorecard of all the legislators in the majority from the Long Island delegation. What I mean from that is the Senate is controlled by Republicans to some extent. It's kind of complicated with this independent caucus up there. But for the most part, it's perceived that the Senate is controlled by Republicans, the Assembly by Democrats, and those are the only bills that really matter. We have a champion in Mike Fitzpatrick, who has put forth a lot of our bills that we're looking to pass for mandate relief, but he's a minority assembly member. So his bill doesn't even get aired, it doesn't get discussed, it doesn't even see the light of day. We need a Democratic assembly member to put in that bill, and we need a Republican senator to put in that bill. So LISA, the Long Island Strategic Alliance, which is an umbrella group for about 4,300 small businesses on Long Island, with an email list of over 100,000, provided invites for every one of those majority legislators to come before them and ask them, will you support this mandate relief, taxpayer relief bill? Only one gave us a partial yes. The rest of them either said no or did not respond. And that will tell you
what kind of an uphill battle we have to get real tax relief in this state, because there's no pressure that they're feeling. But in any event, Lisa has put together a scorecard, and that scorecard is going to show every legislator and what their response was. And there's going to be a whole lot of no's on that scorecard. But it's going to go out to the press, it's going to go out to a lot of people on the list, and it's hoped that long term we'll start to apply the pressure necessary to shift the balance and get majority sponsors to have these bills aired. Okay, final thing for tonight's meeting. It's the issue of union leave, and I'm just going to tease you with this a little bit, then we'll have our dinner, and then we'll have Tim tell you more about it. But union leave is all about union leaders, and God bless them, they serve a very, very important role in our society, both in the private sector and the public sector. But in the private sector, when a union leader is doing negotiations, his salary is for the most part paid for by the union dues. In the public sector, that salary for the most part is paid for by you, the taxpayer, through something called union leave. So, members of the hierarchy of the PBA, Police Benevolent Association Board, or the Association for Municipal Employees, or the CSEA, or the college, or any kind of public entity, for the most part, they're getting paid by you, the taxpayer, to, let's say, be a street sweeper. But they're not doing the street sweeping, or doing the local patrol in the police department, or teaching in the classroom. You have to pay a second time for someone else to do that work, because they are being freed up to do union negotiations, union campaigning, union business. The question is whether that is valid constitutionally. Because if it's a private union or a public union, it's still private, non-public business that they're carrying out when they're negotiating for their members. So is that a violation of our state constitution, which bans the use of taxpayer dollars for non-public purposes? Well, our center's been looking into that. The Empire Center for Public Policy in New York has been looking at it, and you're going to see very shortly a lawsuit coming out on this to seek a declaratory judgment invalidating this concept. Just to give you an idea, in Suffolk County government alone, it costs you $3 million a year to free up those individuals to do the union business. And God bless them, they're doing important work for their members, and we're not trying to stop them from doing their stuff, but should you as a taxpayer be subsidizing that? We think it's an unconstitutional gift for that to happen. We'll see what the court says on this. Okay, on that note, I'm going to end it there. We're going to have our buffet, and then we're going to bring it back in about 10 minutes. I'm going to ask the folks from the back table to come up first. When you see that they've completed, if the next table would go, and thereafter, we'll be back in 10 minutes, okay? Enjoy the meeting. Who has been a spokesperson for that organization for quite some time. But they're fantastic. They provide so many services for taxpayers. For instance, just listing what people in public life are making so that taxpayers know where their money is going to. But they make a lot of recommendations to try to make us a more streamlined state so we don't continue to see the type of exodus that we have in our state. We've had a decline in population in New York State over the last year. And if it wasn't for the influx of immigrants to New York City, that amount would be even further down. They're fleeing upstate New York because there's no jobs. They're fleeing Long Island because it's simply too expensive. And it's becoming a state of rich and poor. We're losing our middle class. In fact, in 2000, the Long Island Association did a survey, and 68% of our population considered themselves middle class. That number today is like 58%. So there's been about a 10% decline in the number of people on Long Island who consider themselves middle class, because those people, they're either living at a much lower quality of life and standard of living, or they've moved to Carolina or Florida or some other greener pasture. So fortunately, we have this Center for Public Policy that's there as an advocate for taxpayers. Tim's going to tell you about the lawsuit that's coming up on union leave, and other things that would be of interest to you and what you can do to become involved. So on that note, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Tim Hoffa from the Empire Center. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having us. We're excited to have the opportunity to speak in front of groups all over the state. I'm battling a cold and I don't know how to hold a microphone, so if you can't hear me, throw something at me. We're based in Albany. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank. What's a think tank? We do policy research. We look at issues that are affecting New Yorkers, taxpayers, things that are coming out of the legislature, the issues that affect you during your daily life. I told you to throw something at me. Okay. Our focus is on how do we create a better New York for people to live, work, and do business. We want you to be able to have a job. We want you to be able to afford your house, pay your taxes, for your kids to be able to live here, for this to be a place that people come back to instead of leaving. That's the simple way that we put it. It's how we think about each and every single thing that comes out of our shop up in Albany. And part of our focus is making sure that we're getting in front of groups. We're really appreciative that Steve let us come tonight to tell you a little bit about what we're doing, how we're working with Steve and with his group, and some of the things we're trying to accomplish together. One of the ways that we learn what's important for us to focus on up in Albany is by talking to people like you and hearing about the issues that you're dealing with and the things that we might not hear about up there, or that we're getting a different vex on when we're listening to your state legislators tell us about what's important. So certainly from a first point encouragement, Ann Hughes, who is our development director, is here. Ann and I both brought a ton of cards. Come get one from us if you have things you want to tell us. We're always open to listening to news stories and hearing people's issues so that it better informs what we do. Let me give you a little bit of a sense of some of the things that we work on. We probably hold 3 different hats as an organization. The first one is for policy solutions for ideas. So E.J. McMahon, who is the founder of the Empire Center, which started back in 2005, as Steve said, is a project at the Manhattan Institute. I came on board in 2008, and for many years we worked on tax and budget issues, because there are enough tax and budget issues for us to be able to spend a lifetime talking through, right? But as we got into some of these state-based issues, as we work through what's happening at the budget level, the impact is happening down at the local level. So when I came on in 2008, we expanded our scope a little bit to start including things like local government issues. And if we talk about budget issues at the state level and budget issues at the local level, and the policies and regulations that are coming out of your local government and out of the state government, we can paint a better whole picture of what the issues are. Step 1 for us is about education and having ideas to change things. So the budget is bad, sure, but how do we fix it, right? Taxes are too high, but what do we do about it? So the property tax cap is an idea that initiated at the Empire Center. EJ's been singing that song since 2004, before we were doing this work. So when it came into fruition in 2011, certainly the Governor Cuomo, worked hard to get it instilled. It's almost an exact replica of what we have been talking about for 8 years, almost 10 years. So things like the property tax cap are ideas that we have for taxes are too high. We're not just going to sit up here and complain about it and call you names. We're going to come up with solutions, and we're going to figure out how to get them done in Albany. Tax cap has saved almost $7 billion since it was installed in 2011. So that's not a small deal. It certainly is the biggest success we feel like we've had, because getting the wheels of motion to change and move up there is not easy. Some of the other areas that we focus on, just last year we opened a health policy center. It's still too loud.
Oh, maybe it's louder. Yeah. Pick it up a little bit. I don't know where.
That's a record. That's not it.
Too well back there.
That's
If
not it.
anyone knows how to control the volume, put it up.
I'll keep going. I can hold it in my mouth, but that's weird. So some of the other things that we work on, so certainly budget and taxes were sort of our bread and butter. Getting into local government issues and how to streamline local government are things that I worked on a lot when I first started here. We had a whole series of papers called the Empire Ideas, where we focused on things that local governments could do both to reduce costs and to streamline their services. So thinking about consolidation efforts, sharing services, long-term budget planning, all those sorts of things that you would do if you were in private industry that just aren't things that local governments do. So it's shedding light on it, it's telling them they should do these things. In 2014, thanks to some really hard-working and naive interns who agreed to do this project, we undertook a review of websites in the entire state of New York, and we had them review 500 different websites to look for information that they should keep it close. Does it get better like this?
Yes.
All right. So looking at websites that municipalities have and asking them to put the information online. So do they include things like contact information? Do you have things like fees that you charge your residents to use their services? Do you put your budgets online? Do you have your checkbook registers online? Do you have your collectively bargained contracts online? And this is about creating an atmosphere where local governments are open with and respectful of their taxpayers and their residents and making the information available. We don't know what's going on in our local governments until they give it to us. We don't know what we want to change or how to talk to them until they make that information available. So that's just on the local government side. That was probably one of the biggest things we did that had the most immediate impact. We did 500 of these municipal website reviews. We released it. We immediately got over 100 calls from local governments saying, whoa, we didn't realize it was this bad, how do we fix it, right? So our team worked with these guys to help them get up to a better standard. 78% of the local websites failed. It was a 146-point scale. I think the average score was like 67. So it was pretty bad. But there had also never been any standards for these things before. So if we go back to these websites now, we know we can pass about 285 of the original 500 that we went through. And these residents in these districts, whether it's a school district or a town or a village or a county, now have the ability to go on and find all this information. When you have this information, you can then ask better questions, you can be more involved in your government, you become a more informed citizen, and you can do more stuff. So the natural offshoot of that, which actually happened before that, is one of our flagship projects. It's called See Through New York. In 2008, the year that I started with the Empire Center, putting government information online was kind of a fad, right? People had just started doing it. We thought we'd create a website. We said, oh, we'll just go in and we'll foil state government payrolls, we'll get some pension information, we'll put it online and we'll see what happens. It was incredibly successful. Certainly it showed us that people across New York State had an appetite for this kind of information. It sort of informed much of our work moving forward on this. It also told us, especially on the very first day, July 31st we launched it, the site was live for about 35 minutes before it crashed because 387 some odd thousand users from state domains were on See Through New York looking up how much money their coworkers were making. Not the intended purpose, but useful nonetheless. So See Through for us, now 8.5 years later, has been a great project. We have more than 16 million spending records on the website. We collect payroll information from every major employer in the state. We collect pension information from all of the 8 pension systems in New York. We have local government spending. We have some checkbook registers. We get the legislature's checkbook, which is a lot of fun. And then we have, I'm getting a mic check.
He wants to give you a second mic. I think you're going to get feedback. Go ahead.
Is this better?
Can you guys hear in the back?
I don't know if that's going to be any better.
Is this better?
Try it. This is both going to get feedback. Good.
Check.
We're good.
It's not feedback.
There's going to be feedback. Got to shut it off, Carl. Got to stay with you. There's going to be feedback.
All right, I'm going to try and talk louder, but my voice is going to give out at some point. So then I'll let Ann talk. She's cuter than me. So See Through has been a great thing, and as we've added different pieces to it over the years, we've seen increased interest. Certainly, it was a thing of its own, and it was a really interesting thing when we launched it. We expected traffic to drop off at some point, and we made a really concerted effort to keep adding new things to it. At some point, we ran out, and what we've seen is that traffic continues to increase. So, at a really basic level of what we do and what we try to inform people and educate taxpayers on is, where's the money go, right? We're paying all this money in taxes. It goes to the state, it goes to the local government, it goes to your school district. What do they do with it? So this is a way to do it. We get over 7 million web page visits a year on C3 New York. It's been consistent and going up every year. We have over 1 million unique users every year that apply on C3 New York, and we add somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 million user records to the website each year. That also means that we do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of FOIL requests. So I know there's a handful of people here at least who have tried to FOIL their local government before. It's not easy, it's not awesome, but it's the law, and we do a lot of work to make sure that it works for us. So the Freedom of Information Law, certainly as it relates to the open government work that we do and the transparency work that we do at the Empire Center, is a really important piece of legislation. It's what gives us access to all these things. And again, this is step number one for us to know what's going on in government. So through our work at the Empire Center, we filed no less than 7 or 8 different lawsuits against government entities who are trying to withhold information from us. My theory is that if a Freedom of Information Law officer isn't answering my FOIL request, knowing that I've got the power of an organization behind me, and I've already sued a bunch of people, I can't imagine what they're doing to the people who are filing it as an ordinary or regular citizen. So we don't take these things lightly. We have we're a small shop, we're 7 or 8 people. We have a full-time person who all he does is collect data and FOIL government entities so we can get the data from C3 New York. And we use him to make sure that people are using the FOIL process correctly. So of the hundreds of FOILs we do every year, certainly ones that we do year after year after year have gotten more complacent, and they can answer our FOIL requests better.
What's a FOIL?
Freedom of Information Law. So it's the piece of state law that gives citizens access to their data. It opens up records for citizen inspection. We call it FOIL. So Mark in our office does all of our FOIL requests. He goes through the process of making sure that they stay on their timelines, holding them accountable, but also holding their hands going through it, because especially in municipal governments, at school districts and small towns and villages, they don't necessarily have the depth of knowledge to know how to handle these things. The FOIL officer was never questioned about things before, they never read the law, they don't know it exists, whatever the case may be. Certainly our purpose is not to antagonize and cause trouble and make them feel bad about themselves or embarrass them in the media, but we do want to make sure that they're following the law and that people have the ability to get access to their data. So this is spun off into an entire thing that we do at the Empire Center. As I said, we've got a guy who works on it full time. We run this website that is all about just putting data out there and making it available to people. And it's been great for us. And it's given us an avenue through lawsuits for those entities that have been really egregious in either trying to obfuscate data from us or thwart the law or just ignore it completely, to go after them and set precedent. So of all the lawsuits that we filed, we've had a few that have settled. Certainly the biggest settlement we got was from the MTA, who had for 6 years refused to follow the timeline of FOIL. So it puts all these timelines in place. You have to acknowledge your request within 5 days. You have to respond within 20. If you do an extension, you have to do the extension by a certain amount of time. And they would push and push and push and push and push. And it would be like 8 or 9 months before we get the data we were asking for. So finally we hired a lawyer and we filed an Article 78 at the circuit court. And we said, you've continued to ignore this. And instead of fighting it, MTA came back and said, yep, you're right, we have. We're going to pay you the cost of your lawyer, we're going to give you legal fees, and we're going to give you the data.
We will pay for it, right?
Agreed. But you know what, and these aren't decisions we take lightly, right? We're not actually after costs and fees on this. But the way to get them to pay attention is to say, I want costs and fees, because then they have to explain to you that they had to give me, I wish it was a bigger number, it was like $2,500. But they had to give me this money, and it's going to show up in their budget, and they're going to say, somebody's going to say to them, why aren't you paying out a lawsuit to the Empire Center up in Albany? And they have to say, because we didn't follow the law, Well, did they give you any chances? Yes, they gave us 18 chances over the course of 4 years to comply properly. So, you know, yeah, we took some money from them, and it recouped our costs. I'm a nonprofit, so I need it. But they, you know, they earned it. So we've done that once, where we've gotten costs and fees. But we've also won some bigger cases. The state teacher retirement systems. When we first went after their pension data, we went after all the pension. There are 8 pension systems in the state controlled by 5 governing boards. We went after all of the pension data, and we got it all except from one entity from the New York City Police Pension Fund. The New York City Police Pension Fund said, we're not going to give you the retiree data. This is data that had been available through the civic list of the city for over 100 years. But they didn't want us to put it online because, as they explained to us, it would be embarrassing to our retirees. I guess, yeah, exactly. Except, this is money that's being funded by taxpayer dollars. These are pensions that we back up. It's constitutionally guaranteed. It's given to us. The right for it is given to us under Florida. And there's no reason for them to hide this data. So we took them to court. This was 6 years ago now. And we're still fighting this case in court. We've been to 4 Supreme Courts. We've been to the appellate 2 times. We've gotten a very positive ruling from the Court of Appeals where they struck down the initial argument. But every time we get back to the appellate level, they come up with a new excuse why they're not going to give us this data. So I can only assume that there's something in this police pension fund data that they don't want us to see. So we're going to keep fighting after it. We just got our last ruling back in February. We believe it's the last hurdle we had to cross before we can go back after the police pension data. So the lawsuits for us, and I'm finally getting to the point that Steve was talking about, really showed us that there's a need to hold government entities and other organizations accountable to taxpayers and residents in New York. So on Monday of next week, we are launching a new organization called the Government Justice Center, which is going to be a pro bono litigation firm that's set up to represent taxpayers who have somehow been aggrieved by one of their government entities. So certainly it's going to help the Empire Center. It's going to file all of our FOIL cases for us, all of these Article 78s, which is important not in a nuisance sort of way, because I don't even get to file all the Article 78s I want to do. We pick and choose them carefully, because it costs me at least $2,500 every time I put an Article 78. I don't have $2,500 to file 300 times a year. Certainly having an organization like the Government Justice Center will give us the ability to do it more often, more frequently, and on a wider scale across the state so that everybody gets the message that FOIL is what FOIL is. If we don't like what FOIL is, we can go in and change it legislatively. That's why we have those people. But you don't get to ignore the law, and you don't get to hide things from us. So step 1 for Government Justice Center is to do that. Step 2 is to look for the cases where we feel like laws have either been changed in practice or have been completely ignored by things that have happened. And as Steve talked about earlier, union release time is one of those things. In the state constitution, there's a clause called the gift clause. The gift clause doesn't allow for a government entity to take taxpayer dollars and give it to a non-public entity. As has been practiced, as we've now discovered all over the state to varying degrees, regularly in a collectively bargained contract in the CBA, we will negotiate as an employer with their union release time for a certain amount of employees or certain pieces of employee to leave public service and go work for the union representing their union. As Steve points out, this isn't the union's fault, right? The union is there to negotiate the best deal they can for their members. On the other hand, the government entity is there to negotiate the best deal they can for us, the taxpayers. And this is where we feel like they've let us down and they've broken the law. So there should be no prohibition on unions being able to have representatives and having paid representatives. What we shouldn't be doing is passing public tax dollars back and forth between these two entities to pay those people, let them earn benefits as part of the pension system, get vested in their health care, all on our dime while representing their fellow employees. In every other sector in the state, in every part of private sector, that happens in an organizational way where the members themselves pay for these positions. So we are getting ready to file a lawsuit on union release time, where we're going to go after those districts throughout the state in different parts of New York, and we're going to file suits and say that we're going to challenge the constitutionality of giving money for release time. So again, we're not saying don't let them have release time. Give it to them, I don't care, but don't pay them. Don't spend my money paying union release time. So we're excited. We think this is going to happen in 1 or 2 weeks, and we'll keep you guys posted on it. So that's it.
Thank you, Tim.
And his voice survived, okay. So, just to let you know a little bit more about this suit, if you think it's pie in the sky, it's not. Actually, in the state of Arizona, there was a challenge on union leave for their state constitution gift clause as well. And the petitioners in that case, representing the taxpayers, won in the lower court, won again in the appellate court. Unfortunately, it got reversed in the Arizona Supreme Court with a split 3-2 decision. So, but for one judge, that would have been a precedent in Arizona that you would see the dominoes fall throughout the entire nation. The good news, even though there was a defeat there, it shows that this is doable. This is very, very doable to win this suit. Is it a slam dunk? Look, we are a liberal state here. We're a blue state. Arizona is a red state. So, you know, it's against us in that way. But, you know, there's different departments throughout the state. And some are more conservative than others. So you really don't know. Look, the way we see it, this isn't even a close call. But even in the judicial level, there's politics, let's face it. And we'll see what eventually happens. But I just want to let you know, from the research that we've done so far, this is doable. So be on the lookout. This will be something that's making a lot of news within the very near future. Now we're going to open it up to some comments and questions from the audience. I do want to let you know as well, there should be an article coming out in Newsday in a couple of days, I guess. You probably saw, I think it was last Sunday's Newsday, about how salaries in both Nassau and Suffolk are continuing to go up really high, despite the fact that they're in financial straits. And one of the reasons is because something called a step. Now, a step, if you're in the private sector, you don't really know what that is because you don't get it, okay? But in the public sector, it's an extra raise. And in Suffolk County, it's like 4%. So you're getting like your 2 or 3% increase, sometimes 1%, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 for your regular salary, then add to that 4 for the step. It's a double raise. What the article is going to be about is that traditionally was always with the union. We knew the union employees were getting that because it was in the contract. If it's in the contract, they have to honor it. But several years ago, when I was still county executive, the legislature came up with a bill to give it to the political appointees. So instead of them looking and say, hey, let's try to get rid of it in general, they were actually increasing it and passing along to their staff and political appointees. So now they are also getting that double raise. I vetoed that bill. It was overridden overwhelmingly. I don't know if I had one person standing with me at the end, but that's the challenge that we're facing all the time. So when you see 7% increase in payroll, you say, well, how is it a 7% increase in payroll when I just read in the paper that the negotiated settlement for the contract was 2.5%? It's the steps, and it's things called longevity and other things that don't count as salary increase, but when you boil it down to it, it's a salary increase that we have to pay. Okay, so be on the lookout for that one. Couple introductions here today. Karen Pope from Senator Croce's office. Thank you for being here for us, and thank the Senator for being attentive to us. Eugene Cook from Huntington wanted to be here. He couldn't make it today. He does have a rep here today. Thank you for being with us tonight. We appreciate it. Ernie Fazio's here from Long Island Metro Business. They are having some awesome meetings of late. They partnered with the law firm I'm affiliated with, Campolo, Middleton, McCormick, and they've had some great meetings, you know, bigger crowds than they've ever had before. It's every Friday or every other Friday?
We try to do 2 meetings a month.
Okay, Friday mornings, sometimes at the Marriott in Ronkonkoma, sometimes at the Claridge. So keep an eye out for that.
We have Michael Dowling coming on the 12th of May.
May 12th, Michael Dowling, who's the CEO of Northwell Health, formerly Long Island Jewish, probably the biggest employer on Long Island right now. Incredible. John Hill, remember I mentioned a little earlier, the Long Island Strategic Alliance. John Hill is the fellow who put that together. He also put together Long Island Association of Small Businesses. So if you have a small business, you should think about joining this organization. They're great advocates. I want to note as well, we do have some folks from some of the unions here today. I want to thank them for really being very courteous. They're absolutely welcome anytime to come by here. We've seen some meetings where people try to infiltrate a meeting and try to shut it down and don't allow people to speak. Anyone's always welcome here. We just like freedom of expression for people to say their own thing. So we thank them for their courtesy in that regard. Okay, on that, Rhonda, did you want to mention the big boom meeting?
Yep.
Do you want me to do it? Okay. So Rhonda Kelch, who's one of the organizers of a networking group called Boom, B-O-O-M. They're really awesome. They do phenomenal networking events. There's one this Thursday at the Huntington Hilton, right? The Huntington Hilton on Route 110. They'll have hundreds of people just mingling, business networking, and there's going to be different seminars going out throughout the day. What time does it start?
The executive conference starts at 7:30, the speaking starts at 9:30, the ribbon cutting is at 10, and it goes until 5.
So 7:30, very early networking, then it goes to 10 o'clock, and the speakers start at?
Speakers start at 9:30.
At 9:30. I'll be speaking, I think at 11 o'clock. I'm going to do my typical spiel on the 10 worst laws in New York State and whether we should have a constitutional convention to try to change those laws. Feel free to come by. There is a $20 fee, but every cent of that goes to charity for the Boom organization. Ernie.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment on the union time that people get paid. At 24 years
You
old,
want to stand up so people can see your mustache?
when I was 24 years old, I was an elected official in the union. And when I was on union business, it was with AT&T. I did not get paid by AT&T. I got paid by the union. And they would split my, what time I spent where. So it's totally in accord with what we did for a long, long time. That was, when I was
Well, that means something coming from my socialist friend Ernie over there.
when I was 24 years old, was a few years ago. So we know it goes back a long way.
Did I miss anyone as far as announcements before we open it up? Ken?
I'd just like to, some veteran affairs. I'd like to mention that this Saturday, the Long Island State Veterans Home is having an affair from 9 to 1 o'clock.
Which Veterans Home, Stony Brook or Northport?
Stony Brook.
Stony Brook.
The Long Island State Veterans Home, they have all kind of cancer screening, prostate, a bunch of booths set up for information about veterans, and it's free.
And what time does it start?
9 o'clock, 9 to 1.
9 o'clock Saturday, a big veterans event, fair, I guess we call it, at the Stony Brook Veterans Administration.
An annual event.
Fred Skanga, awesome
Yeah.
CEO of that place.
And also Rosemary couldn't come, Purple Heart Foundation, they have the big event May 12th.
Right.
The annual Purple Heart Conference they're having at Comac High School.
Great, thanks. I want to do a shout out to my friends from TaxPack and Anita and Andrea and Lori. When Tim was mentioning the tax cap, these were the ladies who started it all, really grassroots, maybe 10 years ago. Any other? You have questions from the gallery? Oh, yes, Paul.
Yeah, just as a supporter, I wanted to mention you did a good job yesterday on the radio with Curtis Lewa. That was interesting, and we hope you guys work together. We're Americans for Legal Reform. We have some newsletters up there in the front. If you'd like to take a look at them, we're trying to help people in the court system. We're not lawyers. We try to educate them with the system. We've been around for about 25 years now, and if you want to be put on our mailing list, just sign up and we can email you a newsletter. And we support
Thanks, Paul. Just to dovetail, what I was on Curtis Leeworth's show on WABC yesterday about, and this is me speaking personally, not as a member of the center. It was on what's going on with MS-13 and these gangs and these heinous murders in Brentwood and Central Islip. And we're talking about what led to it. And one of the things was a really bad decision in 2012 that cut our ties to the federal government. And when I was county exec in 2009 and 10, we had an uptick in some gang-related activity. So I commissioned a task force within our police department to work hand in hand with the FBI and the federal government to share surveillance and intelligence, etc. It really worked. We got a lot of kingpins. We decimated some of these gangs. When the new administration came in, they decided to keep the FBI at arm's length. You may know the whole story behind that, but it was a brutal mistake, and it allowed for a lot of these gangs to reconstitute, and it's led to some really bad stuff. Fortunately, they have again reversed themselves to go back to working with the feds, and hopefully they'll make some inroads there. Now, of the 13 people who were collared and arrested in connection with the Brentwood murders back late last year, 10 of them were here illegally. 7 of them were the unaccompanied minors that poured over the border starting in 2013, 14, etc. So, there's got to be a change of attitude here. And enough is enough. If someone is here illegally and is committing that kind of violence in a gang, they don't belong here. Our local government has to work with the feds to protect our people. And that's my own editorial comment. That has nothing to do with the Senate.
I want to say one more thing,
yes.
Steve. On Friday of this week, Vincent DeMarco, he's the sheriff of Suffolk County. He'll be talking about that very same topic, gangs and drugs, too.
Yeah.
And so, if anyone's interested.
Actually, Vinny's been very good on the issue. Yes.
What is the county policy now, as far as what you just told us?
Well, they reversed themselves where now they're working with the federal government again. But a lot of time was lost. For several years, they cut off ties with the feds. So all of the surveillance and the sharing of intelligence, and very important, the penalties that come about when the feds do the prosecution, you flip a lot of these these lower level guys on the kingpins because they can be very, very severe, very tough. The feds are an important ally. They shouldn't be looked at as your enemy. They're the good guys. They're our friends. It's the MS-13 members who are the bad guys. Fortunately, they're starting to change. There was another big mistake I think made a couple of years ago.
Are they reporting these people?
And not as much as I think they should be. As far as I'm concerned, they should make a list of everyone who's in that jail right now who's not here legally, who's committed a violent crime, and hand it over to Jeff Sessions, the new AG, and say, we challenge you to get these people out of here. Now, there is some of that sharing going on, but it's not really aggressively followed through. But a couple of years ago, there was a big mistake again by the county where they said they were not going to honor a request by the federal government to detain an illegal immigrant who has committed a crime so that the feds can take them out of here, unless you had a warrant and had to jump through all these hoops. Again, why are you treating the federal law enforcement guys as hostile enemies? They're your friends. Work with them, not against them. Again, that's starting to change, but there were a lot of years that went by there where these gangs reconstituted. Yes, ma'am?
Whose authority was the federal task force, shut down?
County executive. The police commissioner recommended, the county executive okayed. It's been reversed, thank God. Yes?
Steve, you did a nice job on WUSB radio.
Thanks, ma'am.
But you had a much bigger audience on Tucker Carlson. You want to say anything about that?
Oh, well, on the Tucker Carlson show, man, I can tell you this guy's got ratings, because after I did that show last Monday, my phone lit up. It was incredible. But, they had known that I was in the county when we started this task force, and then, it was disbanded, and they wanted my opinion. They also wanted my opinion on, the crazy policy that was allowing tens of thousands of unaccompanied minors crossing over the border. What do you think was going to happen when you put these 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids without any supervision in our neighborhoods? MS-13 was making them part of the family. They're giving them protection, they're giving them cell phones, they're giving them this, terrible, terrible policy. Not that it's, you know, like I said, oh, well, if you're making policy, ask the parents. Ask the family of those 12 slain individuals how humane that policy was. There's a better way to do it, and they picked the wrong way. Back to any other state stuff or county stuff? Yeah. Go. Well, let's go with you.
Steve, I don't think the public really knows how broken our system is. I was involved in law enforcement.
This group does.
Well, this group does. The problem is the public doesn't. I'm an advocate in my community. I go to every school board meeting. I'm a former school board member in Northport, East Northport School District. I fought the school district on school taxes. People don't realize that 68% of your tax bill, and there's 123 school districts, I believe, on Long Island. If they raise taxes $3 million a year, that's over $300 million a year taken out of our pockets. The school districts alone. People do not come out and vote. We have 28,000 voters in our district, 3,000 come out. Our library budget just went through for $10.5 million for a library. 300 people voted on our library. It's a disgrace. If I don't mind taking it.
Okay, please.
The problem is that, first of all, the state who audits out the school boards, and they realize that this, I won't use the word fraud, but they over budget, underspend, and then they pocket a lot of our money. They do it year after year. Northport School District did it to the tune of $8 million a year for 5 years. I brought it to the public, I put it on a tripod, I was on the board, and I said, people, you're being screwed. Not only are you being screwed out of your money, but you're being charged interest the following year on the money you loaned the school district. People just didn't get it.
Could I interject on that? You should have been here at our last meeting, because at our last meeting we had attorney Maureen Harris from Cronin, and Harris, and we've been working with them, and there is a lawsuit in existence right now, pending, which hopefully will win, which seeks to force these school districts to give the money back because they're doing exactly what you said. They're over-escrowing this money. There are caps in state law as to how much reserve 4% was 2, it's now 4. How much money can be kept in reserve? They are deliberately violating that and keeping more money. So we have the lawsuit to force that money to go back to the taxpayers, so we're on the same path.
Okay, the thing though is the state auditors came through and said the same thing I said,
yes.
But they don't have any teeth.
Correct.
The state auditors
okay, now I didn't set this up, okay, but here's the answer to that. We're promoting legislation. And we're trying to get Senator Boyle to do it, but he's conflicted because he had a relationship with that law firm. Maybe Senator Croce will do it. But this law, we're mirroring it off of the MTA. When the MTA kept more reserves than they were supposed to, there was a provision put in place that said the controller has the authority to intercept that money and give it directly back to the ratepayer, to the taxpayer. We want to do the same thing with schools, which would give the controller the ability to intercept state aid or sales tax to a school, whatever it might be. They really don't put sales tax, but state aid, and segregate that money to be sent directly back to the taxpayer. So we're hoping we can get someone to sponsor that bill, but you're absolutely right, 2 for 2.
And the other point is that a few years back, the PBA, Nassau and Suffolk County, the union leaders, sued the counties and said that because they do union work, they're not getting their overtime. And they took it to court, and I think you were on the supervisor at the time. We lost that. So $30,000 a year in overtime they get being a PBA president for not working a day in the street and not working an hour of overtime. Yeah, I mean, taxpayers getting beat up on that.
Yeah, these arbitrators. I'll tell you, there was something else in it. There was one guy who got canine pay for the dog, even though he didn't have a dog. I mean, it's like really crazy stuff. But you're right. I would have been. The argument was because I became the union head. I was inhibited from earning the overtime I would have otherwise earned, so pay me the overtime. And the judge said yes. the arbitrator said yes.
Which is why we go after the gift clause.
Right, which is why we're looking at the gift clause.
The other thing is that people aren't aware of, and I know they're not aware of it. Right. Suffolk County has the Law Enforcement Foundation, which is part of the PBA. It's an offset of it. And they have a lot of money. And if you go to run for office, they come out against you.
You think?
I ran for mayor in Northport. They came out against me for $15,000 for a little 2-horse town, a little 2-square-mile village. Yeah. So I can tell you, it's very, very difficult.
You know, it's a democracy. It's a free country, and you know, people can support or oppose, you know, anyone they want to.
But, you know, what you want is to educate the public on all sides of an issue. And, you know, taxpayers are working for a living all day long. And when you're worried about, you know, meeting your payroll and making your next paycheck and feeding your family because you don't know where the money is coming from, you don't have the same kind of time to devote to lobbying your elected officials to counterbalance what is really a professional lobbying organization by a lot of those interests who want more money spent. And, you know, that's the way our system is set up. But that's what this organization and the Empire Center try to do. They try to give that counterbalance and let average workers out there, average taxpayers in the private sector know, hey, we're just trying to educate you as to what the driving forces of increased costs are. Then it's up to you to decide how you're going to react. Are you going to sit on your duff, or are you going to go out there and try and seek some change from your elected officials? Yes?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Steve, for showing up.
Well, yeah, since I organized the meeting, I figured I would.
Second of all, about these illegals who commit these crimes, what kind, are they just looking to throw them out, or are they going to prosecute and hang them, which they should do?
Well, when there's a major violent crime, especially with murder, they're not just going to deport them and say goodbye. You know, they'll in almost all senses, something that major, they will serve time. But not always. I mean, look at the guy who killed Kate Steinle in San Francisco. I mean, that guy committed a lot of crimes, was dumped out, came back in 6 times. One of the individuals who was arrested for the Brentwood murder was thrown out of the country in 2010, came back. Why? Because there's no accountability, there's no ramifications if you sneak back in. That's why there's this push for Kate's Law, which would say, and it's pending in Congress, and we can't get enough people to support it, but it would say, if you are deported for committing a crime, and you try to come back into the country, boom, mandatory 5 to 10 years, okay? That's the way it has to be, because there's no fear right now in trying to come back over the border.
That's not enough, because I used to do security all through that area, and I dealt with all those people, Latin Kings, MS 13, and I seen all this stuff going on, and basically, I actually arrested the guy, and I didn't even know who he was. They brought him to the precinct, and was doing security. The cops told me to bring him to the precinct, I did, and they turned around, they called me to identify him, and they didn't even have the right guy. It wasn't the guy.
Got it.
So.
Marie.
Oh, I just have a statement. Always love to
Shocking.
listen to you. I just found out the other day that Nassau County is a sanctuary county. Do you know anything about that?
The point is, found out the other day that Nassau County is a sanctuary county. It really depends on your definition of what is a sanctuary county. They'll deny it, but you know, there's different levels of it. There's a group called the Center for Immigration Policy or something like that. They're very good. They're very much for legal immigration against illegal immigration. And they'll note that there's different levels of sanctuary city. In some cases, there are these localities that refuse to hold a criminal illegal alien for a certain amount of time for the feds to come and get them. Where they said, we're not going to cooperate with you, that's one type of sanctuary city. The other side, which is more egregious, are those like New York City and Chicago, which say, we're not even going to give the feds information as to who is in our jail. And that's in direct violation of federal law, because Title 8 of the United States Code, Section 73, excuse me, states specifically that no official on any level of government can direct another member of a public entity to refuse to cooperate with the federal government in sharing that information. And these guys are doing it anyway. Why? Because they figure, let it go to court. Chances are they'll get a judge who, you know, makes some outlandish political decision, not based on the law, but based upon his or her own political views, and maybe they'll have a chance to win it. But if you look at the black letter law,
That's an outright violation of the law, and now you have Attorney General Sessions saying, hey, we're going to withhold your funding. Now, that's going to court. And you're going to see some judges saying, well, you really can't withhold the money. I just heard today, they said, well, you can't. So I don't blame them for, that they're not abiding by it. Well, I do blame them. But you can understand what gives them the incentive not to abide by it, because they'll go to court and some liberal judge will side with us anyway. But it's absolutely, positively a violation of federal law. And Nassau County, you'd really have to look at the details as to what they're doing. I don't like a lot of the comments that are coming out of there. Like, there's a lot of pandering that goes on with these crazy left-wing groups. You got groups like Make the Way New York, WINS, Jobs for Justice. These are radical people. And the media will paint them as being mainstream humanitarian folks. They're nuts, these folks. They want open borders. They want to shield criminals from being deported. And they're being talked about like they are humane, average, working class type of people. They're on the extreme of the extreme. And yet they are having all of these elected officials jump hoops to pander to them. It's really, really disgraceful. A few more and then we got to wrap this up. Yes, sir.
In regards to school taxes, usually every, mid-May, they vote on the budget. If it doesn't pass,
Third Tuesday of the month.
They vote on it again.
Not
How is
anymore.
that possible if
That's changed.
It is.
You're allowed twice, but there's a big difference. In the old days, before reforms from Andrea and others, the game they would play is you'd knock down the budget, and then they'd tell you, if we're going to have another vote, but here's the deal. If you vote yes, your taxes go up. If you vote no, your taxes go up even more, and your kids don't have buses, and you don't have sports. That's changed. Now, when you have to get 60% to pierce the cap, if you don't, or you want to have a second vote on that, if you lose, you go back to last year's budget. So that's a major disincentive for these guys to violate the cap. It's completely changed now. All right, one last one, Ken, and then Carl, and then that's it. Ken.
You got another problem. You got to think of a different way of locking these people up. Something a little bit better, but we lock these illegals up, and who pays for all this?
Well, who pays for it when you're locking up those who are here illegally? I'll tell you this. Vinnie DeMarco told me in my last year in office that about 11% of our jail were comprised of illegal aliens. Now, if our criminal justice system between the police and probation and the sheriff, let's say it's $500 billion, it's $600 million, $650 million. The district attorney's office throw in there as well. So that's $65 million a year on just the criminal justice part of it. Then you've got your emergency rooms, your health clinics, your schools. Nobody talks about those. We have 4,000 unaccompanied youth that flooded into Suffolk County over the last few years. What school district has the capacity to deal with that? How many do you get? Yeah, just do it. The feds do it, and then it's up to the locals to pick that up. All right, Carl, last question. We're going to wrap it up with this.
You don't have to worry about Huntington. Last year when the two girls got killed, Susan Berlin announced that she was installing suntan lotion free machines on the beach. So everything is under control.
All right. So listen, I think David Zale was here. David, you want to talk? You want to announce your podcast? When I had my radio show, David was an awesome guest. I used to always have to try to get a liberal and conservative on the show together and make it interesting. And the liberals who came on the show were very regretful that they got on. David was there because he's a dynamo.
Well, we're going to have you on. We're Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. on WLINY.com. It's internet radio only. We have about 170,000 listeners a month. You can go on David's here on Facebook and find the show. And Steve, we're going to have you on. Tomorrow night we have Claire Lopez, who's a former CIA operative undercover in the Middle East and in Russia. She's an expert on Sharia law in the United States and the Iran deal. So, and we have a lot of things relating to reducing government. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks. Ann Hughes, thank you for being here as well. Ann is the director of development over at the Empire Center. Thanks again to Tim Hopper. Thank you, Lou Cron, for being our great host over here. Any announcements coming up?
I'm going to keep the cafe open for another half an hour if anybody wants any more to eat, okay?
And our buddies from the union are welcome to it too. All right, thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks for being here. All right, bye-bye.
Long Island Backstory. Chief Correspondent Gary Jacobs is uncovering the truth on Long Island. The family court system. Red light cameras. Corruption in local politics. The heroin epidemic. Corrupt judges. At Long Island Backstory, we uncover the truth that the Cablevision news monopoly won't dare touch. We uncover the details you won't see on News 12 or in Newsday. We are local independent media at its best. Long Island Backstory, available on Public Access TV and on YouTube.